the Americas towards the UN Food Systems Summit. The roundtable's content from today's featured speakers will be shared by ICA as a contribution for technical and policy discussions that will shape ICA member states and industry positioning for current and future actions contributing to the summit and the direction of transformation and strengthening of food systems. This is all part of a multi-pronged effort by ICA to serve as the hemispheric platform to provide the summit with the information required to help our 34 member states and their ministries of agriculture accurately and enthusiastically articulate the past, present, and future of agri-food systems and the important role they play in our culture, economies, cuisine, and general quality of life. Additionally, it is important that we hear from farmers and farmer organizations in these discussions, which is something ICA's Director General has emphasized since the announcement of the UN Summit. We at ICA are very grateful for the participation and contributions of the distinguished panelists we have with us here today. A few housekeeping items. This webinar will provide simultaneously translation in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. Please set your language appropriately on your Zoom configurations. We hope to have time for questions after each of the 3 segments of questions for our panelists. We encourage you to utilize your chat function for questions so that we can have a record of your ideas and comments. There will be ongoing coverage of this event via ICA's social communication networks, via Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, etc. We encourage you all to exchange this information with your own local authorities and networks to further disseminate the information to as broad an audience as possible. To get started, I would like to introduce our panel. Cristian Allendez Marin is the president of the National Society of Agriculture of Chile, SNA. He was also president of Fedafruta and is considered a foremost expert on the importance of Chile's fruit and vegetable sector. Chile is experiencing a terrible drought, and I understand that it had some beneficial rain yesterday. So your perspective on this issue and the challenges it brings to your sector will be very valuable to learn. Jorge Arturo Salma is the general manager of the National Banana Corporation of Costa Rica, Corbana, which works to improve and strengthen the production and quality of Costa Rican bananas through research and development, innovation, technology, and credits for the sector. The banana sector is under threat from a devastating fusarium rust, and Corbana has been at the forefront of working to study, prepare, and respond to TR4. And your perspective on both this threat and the need for tools to combat this and other threats will be very enlightening for this discussion. Miguel Curiel is the vice president and general manager of Driscoll's Mexico and is responsible for a value chain representing 400 independent growers and nearly 60,000 direct and indirect employees from nursery, berry production, sales, and administration. Given the importance of Mexican berry production and trade, we look forward to hearing your perspective working for such an important global company, as well as your diverse experience of work, life, and education in the United States and Mexico, and the important integration of these economies in the field of agriculture. And from the United States, A.G. Kawamura is a 3rd-generation fruit and vegetable grower and shipper from Orange County, California. I have had the honor of knowing AG for many years, given his many leadership roles on the board of Western Growers, USDA advisory committees, as well as through his service as Secretary of Agriculture under Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. His experience in farming and leading state policies and programs in a highly populated, regulated, and challenging environment, suffering through yet another devastating drought as well, and how he balances all that is of great interest. Also, AG, your work with food banks and the creation of public-private partnerships to address hunger and nutrition is very important. This panel will be moderated by Dr. Manuel Otero, the Director General of ICA, who has led ICA's contribution to the UN Food Systems Summit and is just returning from the pre-summit held in Rome last month. Manuel is a veterinarian from Argentina with many years of leadership in agriculture and agricultural research, working for ICA and for the government of Argentina in multiple positions around the world. Dr. Otero, over to you.
Muchas gracias, Lloyd. Muy buenos días a todos y a todas.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Good morning to all. It is a great pleasure to be participating in this new roundtable and a new dialogue summoned by ICA, who is interested in incorporating all stakeholders, public, private, from civil society, as we are fully convinced that agriculture, rurality are in the DNA of our countries, I mean, the member states of the Americas, and there's much at stake. From the very moment that the UN Secretary General in June 2020 surprised us all by calling us to discuss and see how we could transform agri-food systems or food systems, ICA decided to participate actively in this process. We held 3 hemispheric meetings with ministers, at least 40 sub-regional meetings, because ICA is the secretary for the agricultural integration forum, and meetings with the private sector, with different chains. And finally, during the past 3 months, with some strong support with the USDA and the Foreign Agricultural Service, we carried out a discussion process by trying to look for the convergence of ideas. And that's how we ended up being the first continent in the world that, leaving aside all the big difference that exists among the agricultural sectors of many of our countries that are currently represented here, we reached a consensus of 16 messages. And as Lloyd was saying, we presented those during the pre-summit, and we generated much attention because we insisted it is a time to be together, to defend, and agriculture has a past, a present, and for the most part, has the future that is very important for our countries. Our agriculture generates employment, generates money for exports. It gives sense and life to our communities, to our rural communities, and whoever wants to replace this lifestyle of our rurality is mistaken. And I believe we shouldn't allow it. And I am saying this from a constructive perspective because ICA is a bridge institution that puts together players, like in the case of this roundtable. It brings together topics, sub-regions, always trying to find the convergent positions and thinking of how we can move forward. So I want to highlight this concept of ICA as an institution that has mandates from the different countries, and that we feel happy when said countries play the leading role required today. And this is the moment to look for consensus, to face the challenges, to demonstrate to the world that we have an agriculture that, despite all of its failures and imperfections, is still standing strong, and particularly in terms of fruit and vegetables, which I believe will play a key role in the transformation of agri-food systems worldwide, where we have seen some very important progress in terms of production in our continent. We may still have we will still need to advance more towards the outside and consolidate ourselves as the great export region of fruit and vegetables, knowing that Chile is a key player, that Costa Rica, with its bananas and its pineapples, is as well, that from California, many products are being produced and exported too. And of course, Mexico, well known for its tomatoes, avocado. So we know that their potential is huge. So with this very brief introduction, I would like to ask you, dear panelists, the first question, and I would like to greet you dearly. And I just want to tell you that this first section of this roundtable would try to see of how the fruit and vegetable producers are contributing to food security. And we always have to think about food security and nutritional and nutrition. We are not only talking about quantity, but also about quality here. And I would like to see what would be your perspectives with regards to the importance of widening the horizons towards sustainable production, seize science-based practices, and adopt all the things that technology is offering us. So the question for the panel would be, how do you see the Americas are contributing to global food security, and in particular to the promotion of more balanced diets in where fruits and vegetables will also be part of this balanced diets as well. Let me remind you that each of you has 5 minutes to answer to the questions. And after that, I think Lloyd already mentioned this, we will be accepting questions from the public in trying to generate an interactive environment. So if you allow me, for this first question, let's ask first to Mr. Chico Mura, then to Miguel Curiel, then Christian Alendes Marin, and we will finish with Jorge Sauma. And then we will switch turns for the next questions. So, AG, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Director Lloyd Day, for this wonderful opportunity to share some thoughts and observations, especially here from California. I'm a third generation farmer down in the Southern California area. And we have produced throughout my lifetimes multiple kinds of vegetables. We were in the celery, cabbage business. We've been in the strawberry business for 60 plus years. And we also grow, interestingly, a year-round supply of green beans. And I'd like to talk about this excitement about agriculture. We have a group called Solutions from the Land. And just this last year, we came out with a report that's called the 21st Century Agricultural Renaissance. And the reason we're talking about a renaissance, this explosion of both knowledge, appreciation, and the story of agriculture is, I think all of us recognize that for mankind to continue to advance, successful agriculture sustains humanity. And talking about whether it's a drought in Chile or a drought in California, whether we have a pandemic, whether we have climate changes that is making our operations just readjust and forcing us to look for resilience and new ways of doing things. These are the kinds of challenges that require support from the whole world. And we recognize in so many ways that the world has forgotten where agriculture fits in the future of mankind, even though we eat every day. And so I want to talk about these exciting opportunities for seasonality, and more important, how do you ensure access so that we have ability to eat an incredible menu, if you will, incredible choices, and that we're able to create abundance for the world, for the consumers of the world, from our agricultural point of view. I know for my operation out of Southern California, we were for many years a seasonal regional producer. We produce cabbage and celery. In the wintertime, we produce and strawberries as well, because we have an early season for strawberries. And we produced squash, and we produced beans and sweet corn in the summer time. And we were happy to be a regional producer, but in our marketing capacity, and I think for many of the producers that would be on this call, or many of the marketers that would be on this call, we recognize there's two things that are very important for the farmer, whether you're a small farmer or a very big farmer, is that you must be able to produce a great sustainable crop, but at the same time you have to be able to market it efficiently. And we recognize that the opportunities in the fruit and vegetable sector are enormous. In our agricultural renaissance, we obviously acknowledge, just like so many people, as it was just mentioned, that food insecurity is no longer the way you describe hunger. You describe it as nutrition insecurity. And the most important thing that we see is that nutrient-dense foods are an incredible part of the diet for the future, an incredible part of the diet for everyday humanity to have access to. And so one of the exciting things that we see happening is this ability to let the consumer drive so much of the production of what's taking place on our plate and in our meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We will observe a few things. There are a lot of old foods, if you will, foods that have been around for a long time, that have suddenly become so incredibly popular, and the populations, when they have access to it, expect it to have it year round. And I'm talking about avocados, strawberries, of course, raspberries. I talk about different things like vegetables like green beans. And these older foods that are now available all the time, we never envisioned how quickly the consumption would rise tremendously, where you eat so much more today than you did, say, 100 years ago, or say just 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And then there's those other crops that are older foods that have suddenly have an explosion of consumption. I talk about dates, palm dates. I look at kale. I look at something like Brussels sprouts, where these vegetables where you didn't eat much of them before, but now you eat a tremendous amount. And those create great opportunities for new products in the marketplace that will go into either the home or the restaurants. And then there's new foods also that have been around for a long time, but are just being introduced to the public, whether it's nopales, cactus, whether it's something like a dragon fruit from around the world, and even things like coconuts, which are now becoming a part of a regular dietary ingredient. Those kind of changes, I think, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in Central America, throughout the Americas, you see this great opportunity to expand, if you will, the food box, what's available to the average citizens of our nations, and more importantly, give great opportunities for new growing opportunities for the multiple farmers that exist in our different areas. I want to make sure and understand that when we talk about the opportunities for growing these products, what has also changed, and this is why we call it a renaissance, is there's just so many new ways of growing things in different places. I like to consider myself, I'm a farmer in an urban area, and our goal is that we basically manage land to create edible landscapes. And our edible landscapes is how we stay in business in a very urbanized area. We have almost 20 million people within 2-hour drive from our farms, and we're in the middle of the cities, next to the freeway, in between the buildings. And we look for vacant lots actually to work with. And if the weeds grow well, we know then the vegetables will grow well. I know that these days, when we talk about a renaissance of agriculture, we have indoor agriculture, hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics. We have people growing food on rooftops, people growing crops in unusual places. I like to grow in unusual places, whether it's under the power lines, whether it's an abandoned golf course in an old military base or on a military base. There's a lot of resources where land exists, and we can create this exciting push for fruits and vegetables, and nutrient-dense foods then has an incredibly exciting future. And then the last part of it is, and I'll finish by saying, we recognize that we need new cultivars, new varieties, new kinds of seeds, plants that have traits like drought tolerance, like salt tolerance, like heat tolerance, because these are some of the challenges we face. And so the breeding of strawberries, for example, we're looking at traits, of course, like what tastes good in a strawberry, but also how do you get disease prevention, as was mentioned about the challenges for bananas. There's a lot of diseases still, and we recognize that agriculture is regularly threatened by so many different things, and our goal is to try and create predictability in our food supply. And the more we can find new tools to give predictability in our harvest and our outcome, that's the challenge for agriculture in the future. But it's an exciting future, and we're really, really excited about the focus on nutrient-dense foods. Those of us from the fruit and vegetable industry, we couldn't be happier because we see so much great potential for changing the lives and recognizing that food is medicine, and that we have an opportunity to also thrive when we have better diets. So, Director Day, thank you so much for this first opportunity.
Muchas gracias, Eiji, y muy interesante.
Thank you very much. Gee, it's very interesting when you talk about the renaissance of agriculture. To build a future, we need to know very well where we're coming from. And the future needs to be linked to technology. What you talked about being drought and resistant to different climate changes. And of course, in the future, and many of these things will also be presented during this roundtable. So I would like now to listen to Mr. Miguel Curiel, the very same question on how the Americas contribute to global food security, in particular to the promotion of balanced diets with fruits and vegetables. So Miguel, the floor is yours. Very well. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Ika, for the invitation to this panel. I feel truly honored to be here. My name is Miguel Ángel Curiel. I'm Director General of Briscoes in Mexico. I have spent my entire life working in the field in different crops and during the past 11 years in Briscoes. And I have had the opportunity to live and get to know the agri-food system of Mexico and the US. And I believe that within Briscoes culture, which is a very Mexican American culture, we see that even though this is an American company, the intellectual and workforce contribution of Mexico is key. And we are very proud of that too. In terms of food security, we cannot lose sight, faced with this guiding question, that we are responding to a market demand. We answer to consumers' preferences and the decisions that they make with regards to what they want to consume. And we try to react to that. So we've been adapting with a different supply of products in our industry, be it pushed by the supply of the product or pulled by market demand. So faced with the situation of a pandemic that has affected us in the past 18 months, what we have seen is an increase in the awareness, and I don't want to say the education of consumer, but even though there was a trend towards a healthier life, a healthier consumption, this pandemic has highlighted and increased this awareness in the consumer. And we see that in the increase that we have seen during the past 18 months in the consumption of fruit and vegetables in general. To a greater or lesser extent, different crops, but at least in North America, that has been the case. Now, regarding food security, this is one of the greatest challenges we have. In Mexico, 1 out of every 5 homes has severe levels of food insecurity. And I'm sure that for the rest of the Americas, the outlook is pretty similar. And faced with the market situation that tells us where the consumer is headed, this consumer wants to have is more aware of what he or she eats, and also a more healthy diet. And they want to know where the food is coming from. And that's been a trend during the past decades. And that is something that is something that is here to stay. People want to know how things are being produced and where they're being produced. So a way to contribute to this food security faced with today's reality is to reinforce a sustainable production. And there we can have three general lines to follow as a company. First, the efficient use of water. Definitely, that's our most critical resource in our production system. And not only in our production system, but in our entire communities. Mexico, today, before the rains come, 70% of the surface in Mexico had water problems. So the way we can contribute to this is to have a more short-term and long-term sustainable production. And with that cannot be done without the support and collaboration of governments. In the case of Mexico, a somewhat questionable policy is the front labeling of products, where you indicate the nutritional value. For traders, it was a headache, but definitely we want to generate greater education amongst consumers and for them to know what they are consuming. And in trying to connect with a local solution, what we can do at the local level in an industry of berries where we have 150,000 workers, 150,000 households, by working with this segment of the population in their education and their training from within our companies is a way we can contribute bottom up to a better promotion of balanced diets, educate our workers. And we do this through education and training programs on safety measures. And this then, the workers take this information to their homes. So I believe that this is the most direct way in which we can contribute to a greater food security and balanced diet, and that is through sustainable production. Knowing that the conditions that we have nowadays in this world of hit by the pandemic is that we have a much more aware consumer, and so we just need to educate them and train them. That would be my comment.
Thank you very much, Miguel Angel. It's great that you've also mentioned the fact that consumer preferences play a role, because trade is also a driver for that. Something I should clarify is that in the pre-summit and throughout the whole process, this is not being considered with the significance it should have. Therefore, I believe our continent, our countries, together with AICA, have stressed that without trade, we cannot talk about agri-food systems, because in general terms, 1 of every 3 food items that are traded worldwide come from our continent. So this is absolutely a non-negotiable point. I liked the fact that you mentioned the origin of food, and that has to do with traceability. Also, I think we will keep coming back to water and water stress. Now, I would like to give the floor to the 3rd member of our panel, Cristiana Allendez Marin. Welcome, and we are ready to hear from you. Go ahead. Thank you very much. Dear Director General, and greetings to all friends joining us from different parts of the Americas. Thank you very much for considering me in this panel. As for the question on how the Americas contribute to global food security, I will look at it from different perspectives. First, the growing demand of food. By 2050, 9 billion, more than 9 billion inhabitants in the planet. This means that agricultural production will have to grow 70% and almost 100% in new economies or bio growth. the population is growing, but also the demand for food along with it. There are also demographic changes. By 2030, India will have the largest population in the world, representing a third of all of Asia's population and 17% of the worldwide population. And by 2050, India, China, Indonesia, Philippines, and Pakistan will represent over 50% of the world's population. Because of this, there will be changes in consumption. By 2050, two-thirds of the world's population will be living in cities, which will mean more demand for fresh produce. With this new scenario, sustainability has a key role. Today, approximately 32% of consumers buy food items that are sustainably sourced. With the growing awareness of our impact on the environment, has led to more demand for companies to show they are committed to sustainability beyond the end product, but also with responsible growth practices and operational practices. Consumers today are looking for sustainable agricultural practices in the products they consume. But this brings more challenges, at least in Chile, to produce food for export, considering climate change and all these problems. The perception of ecologists is that the country should ensure water for their own country first, and not to produce food that will go out of the country by export or using water for those products, considering the scarcity of water. The increase in demand and this greater need of consumers and the great growth of exports and imports in emerging markets mean that security, transparency, and food hygiene as well have become priorities. Consumers expect labels in their foods, as we heard from Miguel, to provide greater transparency for the whole life cycle of the product. This is leading to greater demand of products from their origin and providing greater clarity as to inputs used for foods and beverages. Not just to have safe food colorants, for example. People today prefer natural and fresh alternatives. So today, the Americas, which is a super agro exporter, the Americas has about 1 billion inhabitants in the whole continent, and this represents only 12% of the worldwide population. However, we produce 28% of cereals, 57% of grain oils, 47% of beef in the world. We also produce and export a large amount of fresh produce, 72% of oranges, 37% of pineapple. We export 29% of apples, 32% of pears, 62% cherries, 60% of bananas in the world, etc. Therefore, the Americas are a super agri-food exporter as a continent. So we have this great opportunity. There will be greater demands for fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, especially from Asia, and more awareness of what people are consuming. So there will be a preference for healthy foods that are safely produced. There will also be demands for eco-friendly production that is sustainable over time. And our continent, given our experience and the types of climates we have, has all the characteristics to meet these future demands. Therefore, the question as to how we view our continent in terms of promoting balanced diets for the future is, as we've heard, there are great opportunities. And we, of course, are aware of all the issues surrounding this. We will have to put our best efforts to ensure that we can continue with food security and facing climate change, and how to prove that the water we use, for example, in Chile, we have many problems with water this year. And actually, for many years now, we had droughts. We had good rain in the past few days, but we have a big problem with water availability. And people are talking about this now. Why are we producing fruits or foods for other countries, for other parts of the world, if we need it here first? So we have come together from the farmers and producer side to say, yes, of course, we need internal production, but water is a globalized product, at least in my view. So in Chile, we export fruit and vegetables, grains, etc., to the world. And so Chile also receives water with everything we import: beef, fruits, vegetables, even clothing. All the clothes that we use were produced somewhere in the world. And that means there was cotton used and produced for the clothing, and the same for vehicles, etc. So we should try and understand that concept of water as a globalized product, and that it can serve to produce for our own local domestic markets, but also to export to the rest of the world, because we are also receiving products from other parts of the world. In our continent, that we believe has a great future, given our climate, experience, and the large amounts of land and knowledge. And we also believe, and that's what we're trying to promote with all these political problems we see in many countries, political changes, etc. We are trying to introduce these concepts that are very important and apply to all countries, some more than others, but they are certainly the basis for the future and the problems we will face in all the political sphere as well, to produce fruits, vegetables, and other foods. Thank you very much, Mr. Director General. This is my first presentation. Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you for reminding us that the Americas are a super exporter and that we have the responsibility of feeding 1 billion people as well. One of the 16 messages recently approved by ministers of agriculture says that we are the guarantors of and the stewards of food security for the continent and the world. And we should also be that for environmental sustainability. That entails improving certain aspects. And of course, that includes water. We need drought resistant crops. We need to ensure we manage our water footprint responsibly. And as you said, water is used for our crops, but it comes also from what we import and not always agricultural products. I think it's an interesting point to discuss. So to close this first question of the panel, I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Jorge Salma. Go ahead, Jorge. 5 minutes for your response. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank EICA and warm greetings to Dr. Otero and Mr. Lloyd Day. Thank you for inviting me for this very important topic on the importance of fruits and vegetables in the transformation of agri-food systems. Greetings to the rest of the panelists as well. And thank you to all the support staff that are making this possible. I work in Corbana, the National Banana Corporation. It is now called a public-private alliance or a public-private partnership, but back then, we're 50 years now since its creation. It wasn't called that. It came out in a time of crisis, managing banana plantations. And then the first objective was to look at the technical package for banana production, because there was a monopoly of large transnational companies and they just came to farmers telling them what to do. But today, through research, we have managed to provide greater independence to farms. 50% of banana consumed in Costa Rica comes from national growers and 50% from transnational companies. So that first part of exports, agricultural exports, it's very important as a product. and it uses 1% of the national territory. 25% of our territory in Costa Rica is protected lands, as forests and other conservation areas.
Tiene como alrededor de un 30%.
And the banana sector has about 30% of protected areas too. And as we heard from some of the panelists, very importantly, it creates jobs in some marginal areas, 140,000 direct and indirect jobs, maybe more now. So just to give some context, and now looking at the issue of food, it's becoming clearer and more important to understand how important and influential it is. I know that all fruits are very great, and I know we have other growers here, but banana, I have to say, as Lloyd said, every morning he starts his day with a banana. I do the same. Bananas are sources of fiber. They're good sources of serotonin. They also have potassium, magnesium that are important for athletes, and lecithin. Recently, there was an article saying that it cured COVID, but no, the enzyme can prevent. It is proven that it may prevent, or it helps avoid the spread or contagion. Of course, we are at a critical point, all countries in Latin America. We are fighting Fusarium race 4. We don't have much time, but 70 years ago, we had Fusarium 1 and 2. That was the Panama disease for the Gros Pichel bananas that were prevalent at that point. In Costa Rica, we changed where we produce banana to avoid it. And then we got the Cavendish banana, which is now being produced in all exporters, in all exporting countries. This is a main variety existing today. And there was a fungus in Asia, Southeast Asia, and it has spread. Originally, it was in Asia. In 2019, it entered Colombia. It is now present in Peru as well. And this is a very big threat because you cannot really fight it, or it's not economically compatible with anything you can do. We're establishing some alliances now. As we heard from Dr. Otero, we need to come together, and all countries are coming together under the AICA-Bayer Alliance. That's one that we have to fight this. I've recently participated in a meeting virtually with OIRSA that is creating another alliance, a command, a battle command to fight this fungus. We also have the World Banana Forum. We're also part of that. And we're all trying to join efforts to fight this terrible disease. There's no doubt that we are looking at greater consumption of fruits worldwide, and that, of course, is what is recommended today. You may have heard about the blue zones. There's one in Loma Linda, California, Sardinia in Italy, Okinawa in Japan, and there's one in Greece, and then also in Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula. There's a 2005 article in National Geographic on the secrets to living a long life. And if you look at the countries and the different blue zones in the world, it's closely related to food. There's another interesting book on the longevity diet by Walter Rongo, How to Eat Right to Reach 104 years of age. That's a bit optimistic, but well, you can be 110 years. So there's a common denominator, even though it's geographically different. They all have a lot of consumption of food. It's not just fruits, sorry. It's not just food, but it is a very important part of these good lifestyles. There's the challenge of feeding almost 10 billion people in 2050. and of course, with the nutrition and sustainable foods, this will require great changes in food systems throughout the world to provide decent work for producers, livelihoods for them, and all the participants throughout the supply chain in the agri-food system, with health, energy, transport, distribution, marketing, and trade, etc. Environmentally speaking, in Costa Rica, we've just gone through an event that was not seen before. This is linked to climate crisis. Corbana has its own information system, Bana Clima or Banana Climate, showing 17 weather stations throughout the banana plantations. And nobody saw this coming. It was an amount of rainfall we had not seen before. Everything was flooded, even in our research center in Turrialba. So we are seeing extreme climate events. According to the FAO, Latin America produces fruits and vegetables, and in 2019, they exported 19% of all fruits produced throughout the world and about 7% of all vegetables in the world. We believe that with this type of participation, the Americas have much to contribute to the Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals, reducing hunger, reducing poverty, facing climate change with sustainable production practices. Of course, that is a challenge. I really liked what one of you said, that we have a renaissance of agriculture. Sometimes we may be seen as Cinderella, but we need modern agriculture that is responsible with the environment using new technologies. And of course, there's new demands in the markets too. We've heard about the Green Pact, where the EU is demanding more and more efforts to remove certain molecules and ensure a more sustainable production. There are also new technologies, as I've said, for TR4, the tropical race 4 fusarium. There are efforts now being carried out for transgenic bananas. We are not focusing on that right now because the European market really rejects that. So we're just trying to look at conventional improvement. We've been working with Embrapa, Brazil, for 2 years now, and we're trying to crossbreed with conventional methods to ensure resistance. We know we can find this. And there are some resistant varieties already as in a modality where we hope the EU will not reject it because we're working with the same gene, which is a CRISPR-Cas. And just to explain the technique quickly, it's just to shut down the bad genes and turn on the good genes, if you simplify it, with the DNA chain using enzymes. That's a simplification, but as I understand it, this comes from cancer cures. And so this is being applied today in our area. And so we are making all efforts we can to ensure it is not seen as transgenic, because it is not transgenic. We are using the same genes that come in the plant. So gene editing will be a topic covered in a seminar in the EU soon. So it's important for that to happen. In Corbana, 15 years ago, we created a lab for biological control with biomolecular work, substituting certain agrochemical molecules with more environmentally friendly molecules. In Costa Rica, our registry is quite slow. We have that problem. We have green labels, but they take very long to finally be registered. And we're also trying to substitute certain molecules that the EU is excluding. The European Union, I think, is logical and reasonable in asking for greater consumer guarantees. We understand that. The problem I've seen with some of that approach is that there's a very fine line. You don't really know how much is a trade barrier to Latin America trying to protect other areas and how much it is truly just working on the best molecule they can find. But in any case, we're working very strongly on that. Also with Embrapa, trying to find alternatives. Brazil, thankfully, had already done great efforts and taken steps for that. So working with them has helped us. And we hope to contribute to the 2030 agenda goals. And of course, considering all the natural resources, land, water, climate change, we've also tried to reduce water use in our packaging plants from 2 cubic meters. We are much lower. I'm not sure the exact number, but we have reduced it by 200%. So we truly believe this can help improve on that side. And we also had the goal to reduce by 50% the agrochemical use in 10 years. We are at 40% now, and we are still trying to find new options that are more eco-friendly, with the great challenge, of course, because we are trying to find great productivity using organic matter and different techniques for growing that have helped us. 15 years ago, the goal was to achieve 2,500 boxes per hectare, and we saw it as difficult to achieve. And today we now have 3,000 boxes per hectare of 18.4 kilograms. So it shows that it is possible to improve with new techniques. And of course, we have the challenges of problems to markets, but productivity helps a lot. That would be my message on this first part. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jorge, for the points you bring up. I would like to stress something, which is climate change and how it accelerates the changes in terms of pests and diseases. Although it's not necessarily linked to fruits and vegetables, ICA is participating on anything that we can with the Hispaniola issue in Dominican Republic and Haiti with the porcine fever, and of course TR4 Fusarium. We have the Global Alliance with Bayer. Pests and diseases will change, and we have to have good surveillance systems, because many of these diseases that seem to be under control will or are emerging now. And again, also considering the climate crisis and COVID, and the fact that we are just 9 years away from 2030, when we should be reaching the sustainable development goals. Thank you for your answers in this first block. And now I would like to ask Lloyd if he has any questions from the audience. Thank you, Director. We do have several questions, but I think we only have time for one now, so I'll read it out. And I'll ask you to answer, if you can, in 1 minute, because we're already running over time for the first block. From your perspective, what types of adjustments are needed in public policies to improve production and productivity? So, for example, credits, outreach, research. Jorge just mentioned gene editing, which I believe is quite interesting. But of course, there are challenges with that. So I will begin, probably through the order we had for your first interventions. So public policies, and I know that AG has a lot to say in terms of public policies. So AG, just a minute, please.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I think it's very clear that unpredictable weather means unpredictable harvests, but in the same way, unpredictable regulations and unpredictable outbreaks of disease or outbreaks of food safety create unpredictable harvest results or unpredictable marketing results. And so what we need is strong support from the regulatory side, from governments, whether they're regional, local, global, to get online and help the farm and the agricultural community instead of attacking the ag community. We are moving so quickly in a sustainable direction, and I'm very happy that people mentioned the Sustainable Development Development Goals. I hope to link those together with the future of agriculture as we talk further today. But unpredictability is not good for agriculture. And what we do need is more predictability in our tools, in our regulations, and our support also from the public. Thank you.
Gracias, AG. Miguel Ángel.
Thank you, AG. Miguel Ángel. Thank you, Lloyd. Very briefly, I think there's 2 points to bring up. Looking at the situation in Mexico, and I believe it applies to other neighboring countries as well. First, a legal framework that gives us certainty, especially in terms of investment. By this, I mean, in black and white, we need more security and confidence in the areas where we operate. If we have to ask something from governments, is security. And secondly, public policies that are developed should find a balance between what consumers demand and want and what we need to have to maintain communities and a positive balance in the communities where we operate. So public policies that are built should consider that and have that in mind, the balance, market and communities. And of course, communities are the basis, the foundation for our industry. Thank you. Thank you, Miguel. Cristian?
Su micrófono.
I believe that public policies in different countries and hopefully globally, focusing on food, should also refer to genetic development that can be accepted by citizens, proving that these are safe for human health. I think that's very important. The authorities should be concerned about the future of food and the genetics side, which is the great development for the future to ensure we have foods that can be grown with less water and that are more productive. Thank you, Cristian. I echo what we've heard already. I've had experience with IDB in terms of credits, proving that credit is fundamental because if not, it would limit options for farmers. We have deficient mechanisms still in some areas. I have seen that there's a much more fluent, if you will, a smoother system in the US that helps technically, but also in commercialization. So this is a very instrumental part for growers to reach markets. And all the technology we have now with means, we have technical assistance, for example, available, but we need to ensure this reaches producers. But right now, I'm also thinking regarding this question on sustainability in the future, I've noticed something at least happening here in Costa Rica. I'm not sure in other countries. It's continuity, succession. You see now that young people that come from growing families, some of them continue there, but others look for different opportunities. They don't want to work at the farm anymore. And there, we also have to see what is going to happen and to ensure how farms can be profitable for them so that they say, no, I live well here. I don't have to go and seek out jobs elsewhere. Sometimes we have a farm that's been existing for many years, but then the second or third generations don't want to continue because they see other pathways as more attractive for their income. So that has to be considered.
Eso es un problema mundial. Creo que estamos tratando de.
Thank you, Jorge. Yes, I believe that is a world problem, and we at ICA are thinking how we can help the youth and include also gender at the hemispheric discussions. Yes, thank you, Lloyd. All the comments were very interesting in terms of policies. Now, what I would like to propose to you is try to focus on the idea of changing towards sustainable consumption and think about this growing disconnect that exists between modern consumers, often urban consumers, and agricultural producers. It seems they live in different planets. And in this era of communication, social networks, it is hard to understand how there are no more bridges between the consumers and agricultural producers. So the question that we want to ask the panelists, how can we connect or reconnect modern consumers that just demand foods with a number of characteristics, but that oftentimes do not understand where this food is coming from? Let's say they want to find more information, but oftentimes they're not totally aware of who those farmers are at the end of the other side of where they are. So what actions can be adopted to increase or improve this understanding between this demand and the farmers? So now I'm going to switch the order. Now I'm going to ask Jorge first, then Christian, then Miguel Angel, and then we'll finish with AG. So Jorge, your 5 minutes, please, for to answer this question. Well, yes, this is a very interesting question. Definitely, we have to raise awareness. The nutritional benefits for health, the consumption of fruit and vegetables as part of a diversified and balanced diet and lifestyle, and also to develop policies for the reduction of waste of these highly perishable products. We also see campaigns for processed foods that people consume, but you don't see that same thing going on with produce and fruits and vegetables. We should probably have more advertising of fruits and vegetables because they're filled with this. And yes, then sustainability has three pillars: the social, the economic, and the environmental pillars. We have been able to work strongly on the social aspect, which is the worker. We have some very good legislation. We want to make sure the workers have a good wages and good life conditions. Now, in terms of environment, we are always making some important efforts, and I can tell you more about this later on. But in terms of the economic aspect, we have some problems. In the case of banana, which is the market that I know, about 15 or 17 years ago, the large supermarket chains did not exist. It was multinational companies, the ones that would supply things for us. But then they thought that consumers would see more benefits with the entrance of supermarkets, and that things were going to be more um, feasible. And so now these actually are affecting multinational companies and have more power than multinational companies. So we have made some efforts with Ecuador and Colombia and Guatemala, etc., because supermarkets on the one hand may have their social and environmental departments, and then they have their trade department, and that's the part that dominates. So they were asking for a reduction of €1 per box, and we were able to invert that process. And this was the market in Germany. And we have a big problem because if we don't make this profitable and give some economic sustainability to our farmers, that is impossible. So this pressure to lower the price of produce needs to be somehow prevented, because otherwise, I know there's some negotiations going on in Europe and in other places that I've heard of, but the supermarket should act as a bridge between producers producers and consumers, which is what you're mentioning here, an open book supply chain that will link together all the different links, and traceability is important as well. So we have had 100% of banana with some sort of certification. Green Forest Alliance is a majority global gap. Then we have 14,000 ones, and so many other certifications. But that has a cost. And now these certifications are being asked by the end consumer supermarkets more and more. But on the one hand, you don't see this effort because they put our fruit together to other fruit, or they just don't want to recognize that to the producer who sees and makes the effort of getting that certification. I understand if supermarkets ask for that, and we have a very good relationship with Rainforest Alliance, and that gives consumer a guarantee that that product was produced under good agricultural practices and so on and so forth. But if at the end of the chain, the supermarket demands that, but then also seeks for prices to be lowered, like in the case of banana, it is very, very hard. So in trying to find that sustainability, we need to develop partnerships and get together as countries to find a fair price, an equitable price. We don't want the price to be out of crazy and high, no, but we just don't want this lack of balance between some very high demands for a better produced fruit, which we share and we agree. We have FAO producing living wages that need to be something that will dignify the person. But if it's not concentrated to the producer who is having the largest burden on all of this, then it's going to be hard to reach sustainability. Yes, thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Cristian Allende Marin. Thank you, Director General. We are very much concerned about the lack of knowledge that cities have with regards to what's going on in the agricultural sector, the way things are produced, who produces, what's at stake, what are the implications for the economy of a country or the countries, and the role of agriculture or farmers is overlooked without knowing where they are located within the production chain, an agricultural production chain. In the cities, oftentimes they have forgotten that in the rural area of the Americas, we have 187 million people, and that many of them work on a daily basis for them to have multiple options when choosing what they want to eat. So the vision that they have in the cities about what people in the rural areas do is distorted or totally mistaken. So this is very difficult, and people understand that what they need from the field that may go from the taking care of the water or cereals, grains, fruit, or they're just part of the trade system, but they are not aware of what the benefits of agriculture are, the risks, or what farmers expose themselves to, that all day in and day out, facing difficulties and even maybe investing their entire capital on what they grow. So we often see that many technologies are not environmentally friendly, and there is an unfavorable view of agriculture. So if if farmers do not get together and we start seeing that they do carry out good agricultural practices, we will see a greater deterioration of that negative perception of technified agriculture. So we need to communicate amongst ourselves through and communicate to the public of what is being done in the field. And this is a shared responsibility by the ministries of agriculture, the associations, and others. So as with many other public policies, this should be a public-private effort. And this communication should be transparent and acknowledge the problems and putting them in the right dimension, and also showing what everything that is done in the agricultural sector to develop a sustainable agriculture that will favor everybody in the world. Oftentimes, these associations or groups, we pretty much communicate things via social networks, but we are only thinking about the producers, the farmers, but we oftentimes forget about also writing with the consumers in mind. So we need to communicate with them as well in a way that they can understand us fully, easy to understand. Many know about the sector, but they're not experts in this matter. And we also need to compete with some slogans that introduce some very harmful myths. We need to communicate in a simple way without using many technicalities that will then disrupt how they see the sector. And we need to use all available platforms of showing people everything we have to show them about fruits and vegetables in this case for daily consumption and for a balanced diet for all. We need to lure the urban world with everything that we have to give to them in the field. We need to develop a rural culture proposal that may be sustainable, well articulated, and that will help a better understanding and generate benefits for rural communities and the agricultural communities through different options. So that they're not only producing food, products, fruit, vegetables, but to have gastronomic tourism and agritourism, among others. So this is very important. And with regards to the question, this should be done in a very simple way and take into consideration everything I've said so far, because this is a very good question, Mr. Director General, because there's much lack of knowledge. The Chilean Agricultural Association is right now developing a campaign in all the media in order to try to bring together the agricultural sector and those who live in the cities so that they get to understand what it is to produce milk. That is not just something that will come directly on a box from the cow, that it's not just something that they find in the supermarket and that's it. No, we need to show people in a very simple, easy way what we do in the field to produce the food that they consume on a daily basis. And thanks to that, they can live. So that's my proposal. Thank you. Thank you, Christian, for the emphasis that you have placed on communicating in a better way with consumers, because we want to build those bridges. And as Jorge was saying, taking into consideration the millionaire campaigns that often that many companies have in promoting processed foods and ultra processed foods. So we are fighting a good fight. And so we need to develop a positive agenda and develop these relationships by understanding very well the culture of consumers. Now I would like to give the floor to Miguel Ángel Curiel, please. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Director General. Now, elaborating on what has been said so far, and I'm not going to repeat some of the things that have been said already, but I believe we have some major opportunity at this moment where agriculture and food production has been more at the center of the attention of the consumer. So greater awareness of consumers of what they're buying, of what they're consuming. Consumers want to know, and that's something that we have on one hand. Now, on the other hand, thinking that 70% of the water that is consumed worldwide is used for the production of food, a bit more or less, I believe this is a very good opportunity to connect with the consumer. And I do believe it is taking place, or that's happening. This, the, thinking about technological advances are helping certain segments of agriculture to become a more current issue, That is happening at least in Mexico. We have seen some youth that are now becoming attending universities that provide courses on agriculture and biotechnologies, like the use of drones, artificial intelligence, digitalization of agriculture. And for the youth, this is something interesting. They would say it's cool. So how to connect with consumers? Well, probably it can be done through stories. Conveying the stories, like my colleagues have said, that take place in the field. And we have different means to do so. We can use social media, different brands that I think the main brands should assume the responsibility to do this, and as well as associations. But I do believe those would be the communication means or media. So what actions to undertake? Well, without thinking of something specific, I believe that any actions undertaken need to understand clearer what is the value proposition that we are giving to consumers. And depending on the crop and the geographical area, this value proposition may have different elements. So number one, it may be the experience of a consumption. If it is not functional, if this consumption experience is not emotional, that is, people enjoying the moment. But I believe that is a moment for this consumption experience. But they all crops have three elements in common. I would think first of their nutritional value. We know that consumers nowadays are not only taking into consideration the flavor of what they eat, but also, I guess it's still an element, but consumers that are more educated and more aware of their health also are mindful of the nutritional value of food, and I think that's important. Secondly, responsible production. And here we can name a number of things. That is reduction of the waste of fruit and the good use or efficient use of water, taking care of the soil, taking care of the environment, and carbon footprint, just to mention a few. That is responsible production, how we can connect with consumers and show them what we're doing to have this kind of responsible production. And the last thing that I want to say, and that I believe is important, is the modernization of the work in the field, and not only to have dignifying wages, but also dignifying work. Through the use of technology, we can humanize what is being done in the field, the work in the field. Yesterday, I was looking at the innovation and technological development, and oftentimes technological improvement of processes in mechanization, production, so on and so forth, reduce the amount of work. Sorry, sometimes it actually remains the same or increases, but automating and digitizing work would increase the level of training and the human capability in our workforce. So I think that those elements are important for us to connect better with today's consumer. Thank you. So thank you very much. I would like to highlight, Miguel, what you said about the stories. I think that development of these bridges will go through the construction of stories of real people, of the workers that are in rural areas for the development of this empathy that is needed in the consumer. So I'm then going to move to Mr. A.G. Kawamura so that he can talk to us about this very important topic.
Thank you, Dr. Otero. And thank you also for this observation that our world needs to better appreciate agriculture moving forward. We recognize that we're all stakeholders because all of us eat food every day, and that an understanding of agriculture helps underline the importance for support. I know with the UN Global Food Systems Summit, there's a running theme that agriculture is broken. I think most of us believe that agriculture is not broken whatsoever, but it needs to improve. It needs to continue to improve. And when we talk about that agricultural renaissance, the observation is clearly that we've moved from, for example, animal husbandry. And I have a neighbor who actually is just retired at 96 years old, and he knows the horses, the names of his horses he used to plow his fields with. And to think that we're talking about autonomous tractors now that can farm our fields. We're talking about putting food systems up on Mars or on the moon. We've really moved a long way. But this idea that agriculture is broken must, I think, change. I think we need to embrace that agriculture is a dynamic, that we must know that there's not one size fits all, that it's a big tent. Agriculture, whether it's organic, whether it's biodynamic, whether it's conventional, there's many sizes to fit many parts of our food chain and how we deliver. And the exciting thing that I heard from many is that it is true. We have to make agriculture a career of first choice. And there's many levels, many areas where agriculture, employment, agricultural opportunity, agriculture activity is going to explode as we try to feed 10 billion people on this planet. The pandemic, I think, was one of our best opportunities to observe that agriculture is not broken, but it certainly has, and the food chain is not broken, but it certainly has vulnerabilities. It certainly has some weaknesses, but it also has tremendous strengths. And we recognize that during the time of the pandemic, when we had a global shutdown, how many organizations, how many farms, how many marketing organizations were able to pivot and turn with new thinking and new ways of delivering the food to the consumer in a sustainable way, in a new way. We thought that this idea of innovative collaboration or collaborations that are innovative has opened the door for a lot of new thinking and a lot of new ways to try and understand what do we want to do in the future. I think it's really important to understand, for example, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm sad to say that in the United States, I would imagine that 80% of the United States population doesn't even know what the UN Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 remarkable goals that would change the world if we accomplish them by the year 2030. So one of the things we can do, though, is look at some of the goals, not in silos, but collectively. And I would be the first to say that I think sustainable goal number 2, the end of hunger on the planet, is one of the most important things that can happen that we can achieve by the year 2030. A lot of people don't think that's possible. I think just the opposite. Because of the pandemic, it showed us how to move forward. What is that path forward? And that in moving forward, we recognize there's a lot of resources that are not being utilized when we're talking about delivering food to those most in need. And we look at the food chain that exists, and we think that, oh, if we can give our expired food, our our old food, or the food that no one wants, and put that in and make that available to those most in need. How did we get comfortable with that idea? It's just the opposite. Those most in need the freshest, best products. And this is where I think an opportunity lies for realigning and creating a bridge, a social network, is that as we address hunger, we have to recognize we have the capacity to end hunger. Any year now, any time in the future, we have the capacity, but do we have the will to end hunger? And then realizing that there's a new structure. For example, we're taking our available properties and excess properties and custom growing food for the food banks and the missions and the churches. The churches have properties, and we can create a whole new cadre, a whole new line of young people that help learn how to produce food, learn how to appreciate the challenges of food production, but they'll dedicate that good, wonderful, nutrient-dense food to the food banks themselves and start to address the problem of capacity and the will to change things with a new way of thinking. And as we start to realize that the fruit and vegetable industry has the greatest opportunity to be at the forefront of this change of thinking, I think we see the possibilities are wonderful. And this is scalable and replicable all over the world. So it's an exciting time for this renaissance of agriculture. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, AG.
Thank you very much, AG. I agree completely with you that the chains are not broken, that agri-food systems have not failed, that of course we need to make some improvements, and that we always need to see them from a systemic standpoint in trying to improve the linkages between producers and consumers. And in that, ICA is working. And so I thank you all for your comments during the second part of the roundtable. And I would like to ask Lloyd if he has any question for the panel members. Yes, I have one, and it is linked to what was just said. How can we, I'm not going to translate it, so how can we convey erroneous information that criticizes the production of fruit and vegetables that is supposedly bad for the environment, that uses too much water, that doesn't take care of their workers? So there are many people who criticize agricultural production, and we are always more in a defensive position, sort of. So you all said or talked about how we can connect consumers with producers and use tools for production. And that is very important for all of you. So if you can, in 1 minute, each of you answer this. Thank you. So that's a very important topic. We were criticized with information that was not real. We had to get in touch with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And it's been 2 decades with a campaign, an image campaign, and sometimes more intense than others. And we have been providing information to different groups about this topic. And we have been able to invite journalists before for several years, we invited 2 or 3 journalists from the areas where we're being criticized from, in England, Germany, and the other places. And they would come here and look at the farms, and they could actually look at the reality, and then they would publish an article. And that was a very good thing, because that was worth the money we spent in tickets. But again, we have a new campaign now in the social network, and it is an ongoing campaign. We want to clarify things to the consumer. We want to show them what reality is, and that has worked well. But we're still being attacked, and the reality is still being distorted. And now even more, because people write whatever they want in social media. So right now we're working with an agency that has helped us in trying to clarify things to consumer. Our campaign has been mainly aimed at consumers. Thank you, Jorge. Christian? Yes, thank you. We have a campaign via social network, which is reaching mostly the youth and people in general. And we think we have to demonstrate and be proactive that what we do in the field is to feed the world. And here we're talking about fruit and vegetables, and I have had to discuss this with many politicians and with many other people in recent times, because we need to drink water as humans, and we need to feed ourselves as humans. And that's the foundation. And the rest comes later. Then we get the economy, then we get everything else. Now, water and food, those are the basic elements. And that's what we need to convey through the social media, through
hablar con las autoridades, especialmente, diría yo, por lo menos en nuestro país, es con los políticos. Porque siempre hay cosas fundamentales.
We also need to ensure the message gets through in different spheres. We've talked to politicians, we've taken people to watersheds and ecologists to come and understand how irrigation systems work. the water comes through the river, but then it's going to a canal that is divided into other subcanals and it travels many kilometers. So this type of thing we need to inform them about. And it just it shows a lack of knowledge. So we need to ensure that we can share our knowledge, that we can tell them how things work, and all the technology we have available can serve for these types of campaigns. And for different reasons, because sometimes the authorities don't have the first priority for agriculture, even though we should be on their first priority, and we have many things to offer. And we'll continue working on that strongly, I'm sure, in all countries. Thank you, Cristian Miguel. Thank you. I don't want to repeat what we've already heard. We all understand clearly how to move forward, and we are responsible for this. As an industry, we have to inform, educate consumers and customers, but also governments and politicians. And this is continuous work. This has to be done from all our organizations, from our industry in different countries. That has to be clear. We cannot hide inside our corporations or buildings and think this will happen automatically. I think we also have to add academia and scholars. They're not just a source of research, but they can be a good source of information and education as well. They can help educate consumers. I think there's an opportunity there. The rest would be just to repeat what we've heard. Thank you, Miguel. AG?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Otero. You know, for those who like to peddle fear, who sell fear, those are the folks that like to attack agriculture as well. And I believe that that's a challenge for us. But the important thing is when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 goals, one thing that became very clear to many of us as we talk about our agricultural renaissance is that there's quite a few goals that are part of those 17, maybe 7, 8, 9 have a lot to do with the success of those goals. In other words, the fundamental framework for a thriving and resilient and sustainable world really relies on successful agriculture. And if agriculture is not doing well in the future, you can't accomplish those goals. And so that's where you have a new way to talk about agriculture and a new way to embrace, if you will, the thought that we need help moving forward, not attacks moving forward, and we need a very dynamic toolbox. So thank you on that opportunity to talk about that importance of moving away from fear and towards hope and actually potentiality. Thank you.
Gracias. Gracias, AG.
Thank you, AG. Director General. Thank you, Lloyd. That's a great question and very interesting answers. And I'd like to now go into our last question for this roundtable. And talking about sustainability of chains and productive processes. I would dare to say that in the future, food systems will be sustainable or they will not be at all. We have to be sustainable and prove that we are. I know, of course, that we are headed in the right direction. And here at AICA, we all know about the real efforts that are achieved. We'll probably have to intensify work on good practices, look at certifications, all those aspects, because we have to be on the alert, commercially speaking, where any excuse might be valid to try and impose a new generation of non-tariff barriers linked to these topics of green agriculture. So we have to keep moving along those lines. I know there's been much done, but everything that has to do with traceability, all the different footprints, denominations of origin, all this will be more and more important in that quest of humanity to ensure more sustainable agri-food systems. And of course, this includes the production of fruits and vegetables. So the guiding question is, what strategies and actions should be applied to improve the understanding of roles and the importance of the agriculture sector in general and the vegetable and fruit sector in particular? And always thinking about how to drive positive production, nature positive production. It's a complex question, and I will go back to the original order. Eiji Kawamura, if you could please begin.
Sure, thank you. When you think about the role that agriculture plays on the planet, it's obvious that agriculture by nature has to disrupt the environment in order to create the platform that produces food, fiber, feed, and in some cases energy products as well. In many ways, you can describe agriculture is really, if you think of it, it's the wise management of life systems. We have different life systems we have to manage and manage well, whether they're the soil microbials, whether they're the predators that come and attack our plants, the diseases that attack the plants, the beneficial organisms that we work with to try and protect our plants, or whether it's the plants or the animals that we raise ourselves. So agriculture is the wise management of life systems and the careful, efficient use of resources. And that's the definition of sustainability, when we can do that well, when we can do it with predictability. When we introduce all kinds of unpredictability into the system, that's where we have the challenges for agriculture. And certainly climate change is one of those great disruptors. A pandemic is a disruptor. An inadequate supply of labor to harvest your crops is a great disruptor. A quarantine that comes out of nowhere where you can't ship an entire region's produce out for export is a great disruptor. We have to continue to recognize that disruptions are a part of the way this world has always been, and that we have to be ready for those and have more solutions in hand to deal with those disruptors that we know are out there. This is not rocket science, although we like to think that rocket science can help us now with how we might imagine the future for agriculture. Our hope right now is that this weaving together of the different components of agriculture that are described, as I mentioned, in those sustainable development goals becomes the footprint, if you will, for that framework. We recognize that if we can address the end of waste and turn those waste products into usable products on the farm, or turn them into energy products, that's a circular economy that starts to help address some of these inefficiencies within our system. We recognize that there's a lot of water on the planet, whether it's a little bit salty, whether it's a little bit mineralized, but you can clean up those systems now, and with the extraction of those minerals, actually turn them into commercial fertilizers. We recognize that the opportunity to move and embrace not only molecular technologies, but biological technologies to address diseases and use, for example, biological predators, to use biological methods to control the diseases that we have, whether it's fusarium or whether it's phytophthora. These advances are moving very quickly, and we also have an amazing new amount of knowledge coming about called synthetic biology that is giving us a lot of other solution sets for dealing with why we might move into the production of a new product that gives us the same, let's say, resin, or the same fragrance, or the same vitamin packed something through a new set of technologies that allows us to produce things. We don't want to get lost with the idea that, oh, we can produce things indoors or on a rooftop now, and we don't need agriculture anymore because look at what we can do. No, I think we need all these different ways of production to be doing very well and to be thriving. And I think we also recognize that this idea of huge amounts of people living in an urban area, I like that because I'm a farmer in an urban area, and this idea that we can take all kinds of resources from water to open space. I mentioned a vacant lot, and so many areas of this world, we're not utilizing and aligning those resources towards something more positive. For example, like the production of fruits and vegetables, small markets, moving into larger markets where there's value added opportunity to create economies, create nutrition, create a package, if you will, of multiple benefits. And you do it sustainably, you have ecosystem benefits as well. So I think where we're moving and what we have to kind of embrace is this idea is the past is the past. We can apologize for the past. We can describe the past, but the past is not a chain around our feet or around our hands. We have to open open the toolbox, make sure that it's more and more dynamic, but recognizing that there's a formula where sometimes 1 + 1 = 3. And when you can see that those multiple benefits, because you have innovation and collaboration taking place, allows us to achieve a lot of these problems that we've had for so many years and realize that they can be solved with this new set of solutions, new ways of thinking. And that's why I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share with you today this idea that we are full speed into this agricultural renaissance and how exciting a world it's going to be as we start to move ourselves and align ourselves and think about a positive future instead of bogged down by people who want to say it's a future with no promise. We have tremendous promise. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, AG.
Thank you very much, AG, for your contributions. Agriculture is already transforming, and we understand that it is not turning its back to the environment. It is coming into synergies with the environment because this is also needed for our future generations. So we're all walking that path. I would now like to ask Miguel to share his comments. Thank you, Doctor. I wish to highlight 3 points, actions and strategies to improve knowledge. First, to highlight the importance of our sector of agriculture. We're important for food security, that's obvious, although it might not be as obvious for consumers. The relevance we have for GDPs in Mexico, this is 8 or 9% of the gross domestic product. It's always relevant, no matter the number. In terms of employment, depending on the sector, the primary and secondary productive sectors, agriculture and industry, are at around 40 to 50%, changing in some countries. And in this productive sector, agriculture provides employment to 13% of the worldwide population, of the country's population in Mexico, sorry. This might change in other countries, but it's still always relevant. And also, the role that the agricultural sector has in human development. We reach areas where other industries and services are not present, and we play a very important role in human development in each of these areas where we operate. So highlighting the importance of agriculture in these 4 senses is very important. Secondly, as we heard already, we are the stewards of the environment. We're the first to take care of resources, and we have to ensure that agriculture is sustainable and that we care for the resources, the environment, water, and people as well. Caring for people and our workers, and not just looking at it as a resource, but understanding that they are people and that they can be developed. That's a very important responsibility we have in our sector as well. And lastly, education. This is a very important action, as we've heard before, educating politicians, public servants, on how important our sector is, how it works, and what it means for a country's development. Educating through academia and research, working together with scholars, not just on technical and technological development, but also to ensure that knowledge and awareness are disseminated for future generations and for everyone to understand what agriculture is. And in this sense, with education, understanding the responsibility that we also have to fill the gaps. If we don't fill those gaps, it will not be favorable. The narrative used will not be favorable for us. It will be very far from reality. Those are my 3 points. Thank you. Thank you, Miguel Angel, and thank you for reminding us that agricultural producers are also stewards of rural territories, carers of the environment and biodiversity, and more than anyone, they want to see that transformation, and they want to give their children and grandchildren the best soils, the best productive practices. They would not want to destroy the environment in any way. And they want to ensure society understands that they respect the environment. And for that, we need good public policies, predictability, persistence in terms of plans, public-private partnerships, academia is part of this complex system, and hopefully we're moving along that way too. And now I give the floor to Christian. Go ahead. Thank you, Director. In Chile, we are working to prove that fruits, vegetables, and parcels all contribute to capture carbon. It is reforestation of productive plants and trees, not just used for wood or paper. Without agriculture, we cannot do anything about climate change. We need sustainable practices to save water, more technology, and agrochemical products that are more environmentally friendly. Looking at our carbon and water footprints, soils, we have many certifications that prove our good agricultural practices and sustainability practices. But it's also important to use all the channels we can to promote fruits and vegetables in our local markets and export markets as well. In Chile, for example, we have a platform called Fruits from Chile. And it provides backgrounds as to how they are produced. So we suggest content that goes beyond the qualities of the product and showing the efforts that farmers make for sustainability through different channels such as social media. Consumers are now preferring to intake available foods. The pandemic has also led to greater increase in focus that not just looks for better nutrition, it looks to improve your health overall. The fruit and vegetable sector should promote the great advantages they have for health to ensure you have fruits and vegetables or fresh produce 5 times a day throughout the whole year. It's also important to come together and to be part of distribution chains to keep conveying the health advantages and the efforts the sector has made to protect the environment. We should ensure greater contact along different associations, producers, with groups that work to defend consumer preferences and ecologists to build trust and show that we have many more points in common than we have differences. It's also important to develop, hopefully preventively, to create response groups that can work quickly and respond to communication crises. By this, I mean the following. Last year in China, in social media, and you might know that social media in China are followed by billions of people, it showed up in social media that they had found a disease in cherries coming from Chile, and this was false. But the damage caused was enormous. It took 2 to 4 weeks to have the outcries died down, but we lost more than $400 million just because of false information over social media. We have to be prepared for this because this can happen, and it can happen many times in many circumstances. That is another point we need to be prepared for if we are to continue trading and looking into the future. Thank you. Thank you very much, especially with one of your main points that we cannot deal with climate change without considering agriculture. Some people insist on accusing us and attacking us without understanding that we're actually the only sector in the world economy that has that double role of mitigating and adapting to climate change. And that is precisely something else we need to ensure we explain to all sectors of society. And I'm convinced, as you said, that there are more points in common than we have differences. And now I give the floor to Jorge. Go ahead. Thank you. I've written down so many interesting points and strategies, so I won't repeat. I believe that this is a very key topic. I just remembered that several years ago, we've had to be very active in banana in this sense. We had a campaign or something happening saying that there was a meat-eating bacteria in bananas from Costa Rica. And it was a Canadian doctor saying this. The Canadian doctor did exist, but we never managed to see how this came about because he had nothing to do with it. So we had to direct our campaign very specifically to the media that was expressing this. And it had an expansion effect. If we went to other media outlets, some had not really considered it. So after 2 years, we managed to work it out. But yes, it is important to ensure that we focus our efforts on consumers very much. I'd like to share about our history. I wouldn't say that we have managed to handle it all. Of course, this is a never-ending task. We continue every day. But in the Rio summit, there were mentions of the environmental aspects in 1992. There was a banana producers' commitment to change because we were doing things very badly. There was much plastic in our rivers. We didn't have any soil traps or solid traps, sorry. There were many, many problems we had to change. We created a banana environmental commission, or the commission was created, and we invited the Ministry of Health, Agriculture, and Environment, as well as the Chamber of Agricultural Inputs. And we appointed a person to go to the farms, not in terms of policing or surveilling, but to help share why it was important to change practices. We also have an occupational health area to ensure safe use of agrochemicals. There are evaluations performed in each farm and reports are also prepared. Today, 100% of our farms recycle all plastics, 100%. They've added solid traps in all of the farms, so no solids are going to rivers. The packages are collected as they should be. 95% of waters meet legal parameters and 100% have permits from the Ministry of Health. We also have a goal of being carbon neutral. We have 53% of our farms, all our production units, 53% of them, and hopefully this year we will be 77%. And in 2-3 years, we will reach 100% carbon neutral farms. We have a biological control lab that is developing products for pest control, as I've already shared. Some of the results, we already have one product that, well, it's under processing for being registered here in our ministry. I said this takes a long time, but well, we have that, and we have many hectares of protected forests. In Costa Rica, 25% of the territory is protected. We have 43,000 hectares of banana, and the owners of these hectares, we have 12,000 of these 43,000 as forest land. We changed the system. I was part of this, and we based our system on chilies. And this has meant that if you want to have protected areas in your farm, you receive some money per hectare per year so that you at least gain something out of this conservation. And this has worked very well. And these protected areas can be also used for our carbon neutral goals. And then we also have agrochemicals. Someone said that the fear mongers or mentioned about bringing fear into the equation. We understand that, of course, we have to be more environmentally friendly in our production, and we have to change. Dr. Otero also mentioned this. If we want to have sustainable agri-food systems, without agriculture, we would not reach this. So I understand that the problem is the methodology. For example, the EU changed the system that the EPA had. The EPA did the threat analysis, and the MRLs, the maximum residue limits, were established through analytical capacities and labs by the EPA. And now the European Union does it with a hazard assessment, and that's very complicated. And the Codex Alimentarius is clear, and they are changing this. So that change, working with hazards and not risks, everything can be a hazard, and so it's very complicated. We also know that we have to eliminate some molecules. We're not discussing this, but again, we need some kind of a time frame. We agree that they should be removed, but we need some time. We are working already on 2 or 3 newer molecules. We know more are coming, and we're trying to substitute this. Thankfully, with all the efforts being made in our labs with biomolecular research, we're coming back to some options that were used years away to come back, to look at sulfur. We're coming back to that. But in any case, of all these efforts that are trending towards a more sustainable and eco-friendly production, and they're important, but of course, I also agree with the challenges we've mentioned here. And I believe we are on the right path. We're looking for that eco-friendly production. As I said, all our farms have some kind of a certification. They have the Rainforest Alliance and others, and consumers will demand more and more, but we have to do it. As we've heard from our panelists, we have to work on educating, documenting, informing consumers of all our efforts. There's work to do there. We've made some efforts already, but we need much more to be done. And again, the fact that we are not enemies, as Christian or someone mentioned, that we should work with environmentalists and other voices that criticize to explain that we are on the same path. And of course, it's difficult if there are very extreme views. Working with academia, as we've heard too, is important. Our campaign focuses on consumers, main consumers of banana, more Europe and the United States. And we believe that with information, using the media to persuade and share information, there's the challenge of the European Union. As we've heard, they should use information from universities more. We have an agreement with the University of Gemmingen, Florida, Taiwan, and others. But in the Wageningen University, that is probably one of the best agriculture universities, we have that campaign to ensure that they have scientific information. So I think that we have to look for options. I think we should work on those efforts all together in that dynamic.
Gracias, Jorge. Muchas gracias a todos los miembros del panel.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Thank you to all of the other members of the panel for your contributions with regards to the 3 questions that we asked. And this definitely confirms that you are leaders in your fields from the agriculture standpoint and production standpoint and so on and so forth. So I am convinced that there is a process of transformation in the production chain of fruits and vegetables in our continent. We always have to think of how to be more sustainable, generate more nutritious foods and more inclusive foods. And definitely we have systems that are successful. These are not broken systems because sometimes people want to convey other visions that are from around the world, but I do believe that we have some pretty successful systems. We are definitely talking about an agriculture that is intensive in terms of knowledge, that we will have to face a number of crises, not only the health crisis, but also the climate crisis and the acceleration of economy. But it is important to acknowledge and include all stakeholders and universities. And that is definitely important. We need to do a renaissance of agriculture, and that was said by AG. We need to know where we're coming from, what we're doing right now, and see what the world expects from this continent in terms of production of food. For us, we don't have an option. We have to think of food security and nutritional value. I believe these are some of the most important aspects and see how we can communicate this to people and convey how these agri-food systems are key to our countries, as well as the rural areas are key to our countries, with transparency. And to conclude, I would just like to thank you from ICA. ICA tries to be as less bureaucratic as possible, tries to help and serve its member countries in trying to attain a better future. And we know that the world expects much from this continent, so hopefully we can be there and be able to respond to the needs. So I would like to thank Ananchi Boga, Montenegro, Joven Friaca, and everybody else who was involved in the development of this event, which I hope will continue in the future with a discussion of other topics. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Director General. Thank you very much to AG, Christian, and Miguel, and Jorge. And AG, of course, and I would like to, I wish we had the chance to talk about international trade here. We didn't have much of a chance and all the opportunities that we may have, but I believe that every day I start my day with a banana from Costa Rica, and I'm looking at the screen here, and then I eat grapes from California or from Chile, and then almonds from California, and then I end up my day with an Aztec soup that has avocado and tomatoes from Mexico. So international trade is definitely very important. You are the producers who are providing this to the world. Faced with climate change, the producers are the best guardians of the land because we need it. And at ICA, we are very proud to represent you and your authorities, and we want to continue working directly with you to support you and to be able to build a better future. So thank you all, and thank you to ICA's team who assisted us in organizing this workshop. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.